Raphael Leibovitz says, your thoughts on Obama's anti-Israel stance, especially his inability to call terrorism terrorism and name radical Islam, and his recent gaffe, Freudian slip, regarding the Paris terror attack. As you know, he said not too long ago that, some random people, or some people, just some extremists or zealots, I think he said, just randomly shooting up a place. Well, that's an interesting statement for the president to make, because what happened on the day of the Charlie Hebdo accounts, according to my understanding, I'm not terribly deep into this research on this issue, but during that day of the attacks, some of the gunmen went looking for a Jewish deli, I think it was, or some kind of Jewish business, looking for Jews, went in there and murdered them specifically because they were Jews. They were Islamic terrorists in France who went looking for Jewish-run businesses and went in and murdered them because they were Jews. So for the President of the United States to say zealots randomly shot up a business, then there are two sides to that equation, and both of them should have you very, very upset. The first part of the equation is when he says zealots, because they weren't zealots. Zealots, Tea Party people, zealots. Packer fans maybe, or maybe they were Patriot fans, zealots. People who get excited. Those right-wing Tea Party people are kind of zealots. So zealots. When the President of the United States cannot say Muslim terrorists, he is sending a message. And the message is pretty clear. When he also says that randomly picked a business, then he's also saying that not only am I not willing to identify the attackers, I'm also not willing to identify the victims. And when you make a statement like that, you learn everything you need to know about that man's value system. So, what it tells me, Raphael, is that he's on their side. I know that sounds like the kind of thing that makes liberals' heads explode, and go ahead and explode. I don't care. By the way, I didn't mean to call you liberal. That's a compliment you don't deserve. Progressives or statists or collectivists or leftists or whatever. How can you say that? I can tell you very clearly how I can say it. If somebody asked me what happened on that day, I would have said Muslim terrorists went in and murdered Jewish civilians. Because that's what happened. That's why it happened. It wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. The purpose of the event, the reason it's on the news, is because Muslim terrorists went looking for Jewish civilians to murder. And that's how I would describe it, because I don't have any problem with that. Am I saying that all Muslims are terrorists? No, I'm not saying that at all. But I can count, I can add, multiply, and divide, and I can put together sentences, and so on and so on and so forth. And so when I say that, I'm telling you, the president is on their side. He's not on the side of tolerance, because if he were on the side of tolerance, he would say something like, Muslim terrorists murdered Jewish civilians, and we mustn't assume that all Muslims are terrorists. But he didn't say that. And furthermore, when right after the attack, all of the leaders of the civilized world stand arm in arm in the streets of Paris against Muslim terrorism, including Vladimir freaking Putin, and the one person who's not president is the President of the United States of America. That's telling me not only that he had a golf game that day, it's telling me more than he was busy. It's telling me more than he doesn't care. When every single leader of the free world is standing arm in arm in the face of this kind of massacre, for him not to be there is sending a message. He's sending a message. And the message is, I do not condemn this kind of terrorism because I'm on their side. There's nothing else. You can't explain it any other way. There is no way to explain it. Now, I'm sure that Barack Obama, on some conscious level, I'm not sure about this actually, I assume that on some level Obama is basically saying, well, look, if I go and stand there, then the American people, who, as we all know, especially those right-wingers, are just a hair trigger away, that far away from murdering every Muslim in America, dragging them out by their hair and just shooting them in the ditch. He may think that's what we think. I suspect he tells himself that. But look, let's not kid around. I mean, it's not like we don't know these things, right? It's just everybody's afraid to say it. So let's not kid around. What do we know about this president? We know that his mother and his grandfather were communists. We know that Dad put mom's name's Stanley, by the way. Barack Obama's mother's legal name is Stanley Ann Dunham, because Dad wanted a boy. So we can start with how screwed up that is. Dad put Barack Obama's maternal grandfather put Barack Obama's mother into Mercer Island High School because it was the only high school in America in the late 50s that was openly teaching atheism and communism as a positive thing. So we know that those are his values. We know that his mentor, and I think a pretty compelling case can be made for being his actual father too, was Frank Marshall Davis, who was a communist pedophile. Boom. We know that his Reverend Wright was an anti-American socialist agitator, and much more interesting is if you look into Reverend Wright, his kind of Christianity that he taught at Trinity Baptist was called, it wasn't liberation. Gosh, I forgot that. James Cone was the inventor of it, and Cone basically said, so you got James Cone, who is the mentor of Reverend Wright, who is the mentor of Barack Obama. Cone basically said, we're inventing a religion that combines Christianity with Islam, and there you go. So we know that as a small boy, he moved to, was it Malaysia or Indonesia? I can never remember. I think it was Indonesia. He was registered as a Muslim in a Muslim school in Indonesia because Indonesia is a Muslim country. He said that his favorite sound in the world is the Islamic call to prayer. And look, what do you want to say? I mean, you could ignore this evidence all you want to, but if you grew up in Indonesia and you went to Islamic schools, it's not unusual for you to be sympathetic to the cause of Islam, especially if your father's told you that the West is nothing but oppressing, third world people and colonialism and, and Christianity and all this other stuff. It's just not inconsistent, and it's not a freak theory. It just makes sense. It's normal. The reason that the Constitution set a different bar for president, different than for senators, representatives, or governors, any one of them can be naturalized citizens, but the Constitution says that the President of the United States should not just be a native-born citizen, which is a person born in the United States. So, while I think there's some real discrepancies with the birth certificate, let's just assume he was born in Hawaii. What the founders were basically saying was for the commander-in-chief, he cannot just be born in America, a native-born citizen. So naturalized citizens like Arnold Schwarzenegger are just not up for the argument. Black liberation theology. Thank you, Charlie, 66. That's what Cone taught to Reverend Wright, who taught it to Barack Obama, liberation theology. So what the founders were saying is not only does the person need to be born in America, but he needs to be born in America of American parents. And the reason was because they did not want the one person. There's only one person in the United States government who is commanding the U.S. military, and that's the President of the United States. They said that guy, because he commands the military and has the ability to get us into war, which is the most serious state there is. The reason they said natural-born citizen, which means not only born in America but to American parents, is because they were very concerned that he might have attachments to foreign powers, emotional attachments. And people think I'm being anti-black or anti-Islamic or anti-anything. On the contrary, by the definition of natural-born citizen, I am disqualified for being President of the United States. I was born in New York City. My father's an American citizen. I was born in New York. I am a native-born American citizen. I've been an American citizen my entire life, but my mother is a British subject. And because of that, my grandfather was Order of the British Empire. He was part of old school British Empire kind of background. By coincidence, really, I grew up in Bermuda, and for 10 years of my life, the first thing I did in the morning was put on my blazer with my little crest, my school tie, get up, go to school, stand underneath the British Union Jack and sing God Save the Queen every morning. That's the first thing I did every day for 10 years. I sang God Save the Queen. My dad started getting me involved in Little League and Cub Scouts at the naval base in Bermuda because he was growing quite concerned that I was growing up in a British colony unaware of my American heritage. So he got me into Cub Scouts and baseball, and I learned the Pledge of Allegiance probably when I was, 7, 8, 9 years old. So it's not unreasonable to assume that I would have sympathies towards Great Britain because one of my parents is British. And you know what? As it turns out, I have tremendous sympathy for Great Britain because one of my parents are British. And at the time of the Revolution, this would have been an enormous black spot on my record. And rightfully so. We were at war with Britain. We fought 2 wars with them. Excuse me, I dropped something here. So it's not unreasonable for the founders to say, well, gee, the guy who's going to command the American army against the British might be a good idea if maybe this guy doesn't have British sympathies. Maybe he should be somebody who's impartial towards them. Doesn't seem unreasonable to me. It seems extremely reasonable to me. I'm disqualified to be president of the United States by the definition of natural-born citizen. However, whether you want to argue whether Obama was born in Hawaii or not, there is no question, none, zero, that standard has now disappeared. It's gone. So now I am qualified to be president of the United States. And the reason I'm qualified to be president of the United States is because we've had a 2-term president of the United States who, no matter what discussion there may be about whether he was born in America or not, there is no discussion whatsoever about the fact that his father was a foreign national. And a lot of people are bringing up Ted Cruz. Yeah, it's true. Ted Cruz is disqualified by the standard definition of natural-born citizen. But my feeling on this is that if the Democrats have destroyed the standard with the election of Barack Obama and the American people have let it happen, then the standard is destroyed. I'm not going to reestablish a standard to keep our own people out of an office. Once that standard has been lowered, it's lowered. It's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. It's just gone. And we can talk about, well, gee, I don't know, but no, it's gone. So what are we going to do? It's gone, so it's gone. Ted Cruz, I think, was born in, I want to say he was born in Canada, actually, to American father and stuff. He's got a legal argument that he's eligible. I guarantee you that if it turns out that he's the nominee, the press will pile on him in a way it never did onto Barack Obama. But you know what? Let's put Ted Cruz aside. I want to talk about the question, which is why Obama couldn't come out and say radical Islam and so on. It's because he's on their side, okay? He grew up in Islamic schools. I grew up in British schools. He had a socialist Kenyan father and then an Indonesian Muslim stepfather. I had a British mother. All of Barack Obama woke up every morning through his childhood and heard the Muslim call to prayer. I woke up every morning throughout my childhood and said, "God save the Queen," and sang hymns like Jerusalem and the prayer for those in peril on the sea. And needless to say, it affected the way I look at things. So what's the problem here? Why would anybody have a problem with this? Of course, he's on their side. That is a problem. That is a problem because if you were to say, well, geez, Barack, the President of the United States has strong sympathies towards the British or the French or the Australians or the Canadians, I'd say, where's the problem? They're our allies. But when the President has strong sympathies to the people that are our enemies in a war that's been going on at least since 1979, you've got a problem. And they won't talk about it, but it's the truth, and we all know it. Let's see here. Yeah, we can keep going for a little while anyway.